members of the media, the Minister and his entourage, and the entire country at large. Without necessarily wasting much time, I'm going to give over to Minister to give us the reason why we are here for this media briefing. But before I do that, allow me to introduce the panel. We have our Minister, Minister of Employment and Labour, Minister Thulas Nxesi. We have the Deputy Minister, Minister Mloi. We have our DG, Tobile Lamati, and we are having our COO, Mr. Masha Broncos. They'll be joining us, they'll be responding to the questions, and therefore, let me welcome you and possibly allow Minister to come over and brief the country. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabelo. The Deputy Minister, the DG, and the COO, the members of the media, and ladies and gentlemen. Sabelo says, I'm the one to say, why are we here? We are responding to the AG's findings. So that's that. Ladies and gentlemen, since the declaration of the state of disaster in March and the beginning of the lockdown, the Unemployment Insurance Fund has been called upon to massively increase its role in the provision of the social benefit safety net to laid-off workers. I can report the following. In terms of COVID-19 TERs benefit, 41.6 billion has been disbursed in 9.5 million payments to the laid-off workers, representing 822,000 employers. These benefits have supported the millions of the laid-off workers, their families, and injected cash into the local economies. This is an update on the AG's report this morning, which recorded 37 billion had been disbursed by the end of June this year. Meanwhile, during the state of disaster, normal UIF of 5.9 billion have been out for over 1 million claims or claimants. The COVID TERs benefit payments represented a massive increase in the mandate and upscaling of the operations in the UIF. And from the very start of the COVID-19 TERs benefits, especially given the large amounts of the funds involved, the following measures were implemented. As Minister, I think some of you will remember in this same platform, right from the beginning, I said that the UIF needed to strengthen its financial controls with all partners at NEDLEC, that is the National Economic Development and Labour Council. It was agreed that there would be a complete audit of all payments, what we called follow the money strategy. And we also invited the AG, we invited them in to perform an interim audit to highlight any risks or gaps. In addition, more recently, the President has issued a proclamation instructing the AG to audit all the COVID-related government transactions. We have now received the AG's audit report, which points to numerous gaps, risks, and inadequate controls and verification processes. This has resulted in illegal payments, amongst others, to recipients of the state grants, students receiving NSFAS payments, public servants, and even UIF employees, and even inmates, deceased persons, and minors. There is also evidence of overpayments and underpayments, as well as inflated claims. I take these breaches very seriously. The AG has recommended that in each instance, the UIF and the department collaborate with other state organs and law enforcement to investigate every illegal action and risk identified. Subsequent to an earlier briefing by the AG, internally, of course, in the department, this we are already implementing. On the 24th of August, the SIU launched a rapid forensic audit into the AG's findings and on the UIF with regards to the SCM processes, because some of the areas fall outside their ambit. The department and the UIF have worked through this fusion center with other government department agencies and database to close the gaps and eliminate the risks. The fusion center is a combination of law enforcement agencies, which is intended to speed up the investigations and prosecutions of the COVID-19 related fraud and corruption cases. It consists of the Financial Intelligence Center, Independent Police Investigation Directorate, the National Prosecuting Authority, the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation, the Special Investigation Unit, and the State Security Agents. This allows all forces to work together speedily in resolving the cases. So the UIF cases are handled in the Fusion Center and they are dealt with speedily. We have requested the National Treasury to deploy the technical resources to the UIF to urgently implement the recommendations of the AG and to develop system solutions to identified gaps and risks. In addition, the National Treasury is assisting the DG of the department to identify the service provider to conduct a forensic investigation into the overall workings of the UIF. We will also be looking into the workings of the compensation fund. Some 38 court cases have been opened and charges laid against the perpetrators, drawing on the evidence from the AG's findings, but as well as from the suspicious transactions which were picked up by the UIF owns risk management unit. Some of these cases are already before courts and perpetrators in jail, some given bail and so on. I await the outcomes of these processes before announcing further action against individuals and entities. The AG has now released publicly the first special audit report into COVID expenditure, including the UIF 19 TERs transaction, indicating the serious risks and violations. And in the light of this, and because this this occurred on his watch, this morning I suspended the UIF commissioner. I can see that some of the people decided to break the story even before I can announce it publicly. And I've appointed and designated Marsha Bronkhorst as an acting commissioner. Marsha is currently the COO of the department, but for now we're going to second her to the UIF. There's Marsha seated there. In a similar fashion, the DG of the Department of Labor and Employment has suspended the UIF management, the CFO, the COO, and the head of the supply chain. These moves allow for the SIU to conclude its forensic investigations completely unfettered. The same with our own investigation, which has been recommended by the AG, where we are also involved in forensic investigations. This will allow those processes to continue. This is not the end of the matter. The complete audit of all covered TERs benefit payments, as agreed with all social partners at Netlec, commences also this month. We are following the money, like I said long ago. Beyond that, the AG will have a second bite in terms of the annual statutory audit for 2020-21. I assure you that I will not rest until every payment is accounted for and every wrongdoer is made to account. They can run, but they will not hide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And now it's time for questions and will be led by Ish and Jabu. We'll start with you, Ishmael, on telephones.
Thanks, Chair. We don't have questions on the telephone lines.
Can we proceed, Jabu?
Thank you, Chair. Currently, there's no questions.
Currently, there are no questions. So is that suggesting that we are coming to the end of the briefing? Fine, in the absence of none, through you, Minister, I'm told that they are still coming. We'll wait for those questions to come, if there's one or two. Okay. You're live, Minister. It's already in the meeting. Ish and Jabu.
Still no questions on my side, Chair.
They're still coming from my side.
Okay.
They're still typing this guy's name, and I'm not sure if you can request one to say something because we just okay. Yeah. And then I can whisper with the minister.
You can proceed, Jabu.
I have one question from John Fraser from ZA Confidential. It's asking, does the minister himself not accept any responsibility for the TERs mess? Thank you.
Okay. Any telephonic question, Ish?
No
Before we
telephone questions, Chair.
Fine. Minister will give you an opportunity to respond to that question.
Okay.
While you're sitting, Minister, it's fine. You don't need anything. Just proceed.
Just press there.
Yeah, on proceed, Minister. It's okay.
Is it fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
You see that one? There's no connection.
It's okay.
Thank you. Do you hear me? Well, what I can say, as the executive authority responsible for that department, I must make sure that there's accountability to everybody. I am also accountable to the president. I'm accountable to the cabinet. But what is my role? My role is an oversight role. And I would like to mention that in terms of the operational financial issues, in terms of the PFMA, ministers do not involve themselves in SCM, procurement, and financial matters. Yes, I do have an overall oversight, and I must also be accountable. The UIF, what we are dealing with here, is the operational issues, is the issues we have been raising with the management that they must be attended to. That's how far I would go.
Thank you, Minister. Colleagues, do we have further questions?
Yes, I have a few questions.
Proceed, Jabu.
I have Heidi from ENCA. The minister was aware of issues with TERs, COVID TERs, a while back. Not only now that the AG has highlighted irregularities, what took so long to take the necessary step to suspend or take action? And I have another question from Jan de Lange from Rapport. Is saying employer organizations complain consistently about delays with the TERs payment system since it was implemented. Wasn't this an early indication to the minister that something is seriously wrong? And then I have another question from Lungam Kize from Val Observer. He's saying that his question is directed to the Minister of UIF. Has the Department of Labour suspended payments of UIF to deserving applicants? What measures are in place to cushion the poor employees who rely on the money to put food on the table? And then I have another question. I don't know, Chair, if should I continue to come back?
Let's take it as the last one.
Okay. I have another question from Genevieve Quinto, Business Day. She says some workers are still waiting for payments of TERs for applications made in April and May. When can they expect their money? And when does the department hope to clear all outstanding payments? Has the UIF started making payments for the extended period? There was talk of the TERs. Sorry, Chair. There was talk of the TERs being extended to September. Is this going ahead? Why was the UIF for so long allowed to dismiss complaints by workers that they were not receiving their money and deny there was any backlog, when it was clear that there were many issues with the system? I have another question, Chair.
That will definitely be the last one for this round.
From Craig Nicholson, Daily Maverick. Regarding the 8 court cases that have been opened, have any criminal charges been laid against the UIF Commissioner, CFO, COO, and head of supply chain? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jabu. Minister, TM, DG.
Let me start with the easiest one. Why was the UIF dismissive to complaints? That's incorrect. It's an incorrect question. We have never been dismissive. All along we have said there are still a lot of outstanding payments which needed the validation and the verifications. We have said that. And we have said, once all those have been verified, we will pay. And my last count was that this figure was at about $1 million. It went down to 700,000. And later on I was told that the number of the outstanding payments had also gone down. So we had continued to deal with those. And we confirmed to the social partners and even to the public that any outstanding payments, we were going to deal with them. Remember, verifications had to be done. You don't just simply pay because people have applied, from both the side of the employers and the employees. Let me just make a case or an example here. As early as last week, one particular employer complained to me that he or she had not been paid. And then I said, what is happening? And then they discovered that they had not filled in the forms properly and had to go back to the accountant of that particular company. So there would be also these issues which need to be verified, go back to the people and so on, and then ask the people to resubmit. So I want to be very clear, there was never a stage that we were dismissive of outstanding claims. You might say we were dismissive, but if the claims, all the necessary information was not there, there was no way that should be processed. Why take so long to take action? Remember that the UIF was constantly updating its controls. It was not enough. And remember that the UIF was called upon to increase its activities and disbursements tenfold, using essentially the same existing creaking infrastructure. It had never happened for the UIF even to pay $500,000 within a very short space of time. And therefore, that was the main cause. We couldn't just jump into this thing. You wouldn't have a minister just jumping into this thing. We said, do all the necessary things and ensure that your risk management is also looking into these issues. In fact, some of the cases we discovered it. I remember we talked about 75 companies, and we talked about that in this particular forum. And the investigations which we're doing, and the criminal investigations which we were also doing. The employer organizations who complained, or the employers who complained. The same thing with the employers. We kept on briefing them on the progress. We kept on talking about the problems openly. When last week I was asked a question in Parliament about the suspension of the UIF as a result of the audit observations, I said, and I want to repeat it, I said, it's not for the first time we're doing this. Every time there will be what we called stop and go in the payments for a day or half a day whenever a problem had been identified. And then you deal with that particular problem. So even when we decided to suspend, seeing other things, we didn't want to repeat the same mistakes which were identified by the AG. We had been on our own been doing that. The issue of the stop and go. So what I am trying to say, by the way, some of the companies here are also implicated for claiming or overclaiming, they also have to answer, because you must not think that there was rot only inside the department or lack of controls. It takes two to tango. There were people who were outside, some companies, some individuals, and people inside. So we are dealing with all those issues. And we also had to establish whether these were isolated incidents or it was a pattern of these events. In some instances they are isolated, but in some it is a pattern. But what is very clear, there was also lack of the basic controls as per the prescripts of Treasury and the PFMA. Have we suspended the payments? After the AG's observations, we suspended the payments for a day. After that, we continued, like we had been doing. Some are still expecting a pay. You see, there's one thing which we have to deal with. We've had people in the queues, some people who have been trying the 350, some people, if they are not getting that 350, they come on the UIF side and they go to the media and say we have not been paid. And without even the verification about the status of those people, it's easy some of the people in the media to say so many people have not been paid. Our understanding is that if you have not been paid, there is a particular query which we have to deal with. And until those have been clarified, we can't just simply pay. Yes, we have continued with the payments because it was a day's suspension like we had done or we had been doing, that from time to time we have that stop and go dealing with the issues. But on the basic controls, we were very clear. We were very clear to the management. We kept on reminding them that your controls must always be up to date. That is why when it comes to the audit findings, we are equally disappointed that some of the basic things, we understand the pressure and the environment which people had to work on. If you used to processing 10,000 a month, all of a sudden you have to process millions. We understand that. It might put a lot of pressure on the system, but it doesn't mean that you must compromise the basic controls. Deputy Minister, you want to talk?
No, thanks, Minister. I was just going to actually quote you on that question about whether we have anybody already charged criminally. But just to quote you on the fact that the Minister just recently, just said that we've got a system in place through the Fusion Center, which involves other government departments actually and other agencies that are following the money, that are making sure that it will be, I'm sure you would understand that we wouldn't just willy-nilly go after people when we have not had a tangible report before us. So once this, and precisely because this has to be done urgently. So as soon as we get that report, as the Minister has indicated, we will be able to present it. But also we have committed ourselves in Parliament recently. When we were appearing before Parliament, we indicated the fact that we are committed to follow the money and make sure that we report continually and expeditiously to Parliament on all the processes that unfolded. And actually we have been doing that. And actually the report of the AG has come up at the time when we had already done our own investigation, where the Minister has actually said, let us appoint companies that must follow the money. I think that one, the Minister should, maybe the DG will actually elaborate on that one also. Those companies that will be taken on board to be able to follow through on the monies that are outstanding.
Let me just add one issue which I've forgotten. The extension of the TERs payment. This was raised at NEDLEC by the social partners, that this must be extended to September, to the 15th of September, because some of the companies had not yet opened, or some sectors, but those sectors are few who have not yet opened because of the lockdown. And there was an agreement that this should be extended. However, I needed an assurance from the DG and the actuaries of the UIF if we're going to be able to afford. And we were given an assurance that we're going to afford. And these are the processes which we've had to first follow. And we had also to consult with the UIF board, on this proposal. That's why then we had to first, because you don't just take a decision, you have to process it. So we have to process that decision accordingly so that I'm able to report properly to the cabinet. Do you want to add something? No, I think I've covered it.
Ish, do you have any question?
The lines, Chair. Thank you.
Can we take the last round from you, Jabu? All your questions?
Thank you, Chair. I have one question from Naledi Kumalo from VAL Observer. It's saying, in the VAL, the two application points, specifically in Van der Beach Park and Vernaching, are always offline. Applicants are forever told to go back home and come back after 10 working days. She's asking, why is your system always off? And why does it take 4 months for your system to correct simple things like changing banking details? Does your online facility, you filing, ever operational? Thank you, Chair.
We'll take that as the last question for the day. Minister DJ. Before you close, Minister.
No. Thank you very much, Minister, Deputy Minister, and the colleagues. The systems of the department, especially the U-filing. This is not the first complaint that we're receiving as far as U-filing is concerned. And the Commissioner is on record as having indicated that there were challenges that were experienced, and as a result of that, U-filing had to be enhanced. And the U-filing system is now working, and there are people who are using it on a regular basis. And in fact, in some instances where people have indicated that U-filing is not working, it had to do with the incorrect information that people were putting on the system. I just also want to go back to the question raised with regards to the UIF backlog. Any company or any system that has to deal with or that has to take applications, those applications have to be competent applications. Otherwise, if they're not competent, the system will reject them. I mean, if you go to a bank, you apply for something, and there's a area in the form that you have not completed, and it's a compulsory area that you need to complete, that application is not going anywhere. So in a similar way, in the system that we're using, we had to put controls. For instance, if you've spelled your name wrongly, the system will not recognize you, and therefore the application will not be processed. And we've worked with the different sectors here where people were saying there's a backlog. We went back to them, and I was part of those meetings where we said, take us through what you've submitted. And after a lengthy discussion with them, a number of them have realized that they actually made a lot of errors, and they've requested us to give them time to go back and make corrections to those applications. And that's how we've been able to work through what other people would refer to as backlog, but we call them incompetent applications, because if we can only have a backlog if applications are competent, and we just have not made time to process those applications. So we haven't had, and I still want to maintain that the only applications that we haven't paid are those of people who have not met the requirements that the requirements of the systems for those applications to be processed. Thank you, Ms.
As I close, can I check if the Deputy Minister want to say something?
No, Minister, I was just as a follow-up on what the DG said with regards to the long queues. I think we are all aware, and actually the long queues were also exacerbated by the lockdown. After the lockdown, remember during the lockdown, everything was shut down and people couldn't come, but that is why we had actually set up drop boxes in all our labor centers for people to drop off information. But since after the relaxation of the levels in terms of the lockdown, we had actually been inundated with quite a huge number. Now, I think we are having to synchronize. I'm sure Minister knows that we have to work closely with the CCMA, because the CCMA, remember, any employer who must retrench, whether you have to apply for a Section 89 or 89A to the CCMA in terms of having to lay off or retrench employees, they have to apply to the CCMA. So it will be actually in our own favor to make sure that we instead of having to allow queues to be so long, we can actually get quickly the information as it comes from the CCMA, because the CCMA then approves or denies or rejects the applications from these employers, instead of an employee having to go and queue and having to be returned to say your information is incomplete. Because remember, any employee who has been retrenched must still go back to the employer and bring back a UI 19 form which has been filled by the employer. But if it goes via the CCMA, it gets quicker and we short circuit the process, because it comes from the CCMA having been filled in. Then we will automatically know the information that, oh, these are the employees who have been actually laid off by this particular employer. So we are trying to synchronize our work and make sure that everything works together quicker. Thank you.
Just in closing, I want to emphasize that remember that at some stage all our labor centers were closed because of the COVID. You're also dealing with the workers there, and they were not regarded as critical services. We had to close those. Even as we open, they are not all fully opened. We had to work with the, what I would say, skeleton staff. But that does not justify the lack of the basic controls. But I must emphasize that the gaps and the risks which have been identified across the government departments which were being audited, which include failure to coordinate across the government database, leading to double dipping, so that grants recipients, student, public employees even an inmate, as I was saying, and the deceased person were found to be claiming from the different sources. I think that is an issue of coordination. The inadequacy of the IT system, of course, the weak internal controls, which provide for an opportunity for fraud and corruption, weak supply chain processes. These are the issues we have to deal with. But I want to say, and I want to emphasize this, you bear in mind a tenfold increase in the operational activity resting on the same existing infrastructure with that inadequate IT support and systems. Indeed, previously, as early as March, before the lockdown, we had identified the need for the wholesale restructuring of both the UIF and the compensation fund, for that matter. That process has begun. And then came the pandemic, and we were forced now to repair that aeroplane in full flight. You'll see in my statement that we are now looking at, or for a fundamental overhaul of the two funds. And the National Treasury is already in assisting the DG to identify suitable providers to assist with the re-engineering, or with re-engineering the structure, the business model and processes of those funds, and developing systems, solutions to their difficulties in terms of providing quality and timely service to the clients and the public. I thank you.
Colleagues, we are done. Thank you, Minister, GM, TG, and COO. And thank you very much to our colleagues. And thank you, South Africa, for listening to us. Thank you very much.